staff who continue to guide and to encourage and invest in these little young minds every single day. Their work often go beyond classroom to helping to shape character, confidence, and community. So I am really, really grateful. And the costumes, bright and pretty, not true? One more time for them. Ladies and gentlemen, what a month May is. It's Child's Month. This week is Education Week. We had Read Across Jamaica Day, Teachers Day, coming up Sundays. We had Midwives Day. And today, Chairman, you would be delighted to know the work that is being done by your former student with the Jamaica Red Cross Society. And today across the world, Mr. Martin Gooden, today across the world is World Red Cross Day. And coming up later this month, we have Labor Day. And so with so many celebrations happening, some of us are just hoping that our pockets will survive the month. But truly, May reminds us of the people who shape lives: teachers, mentors, mothers, caregivers, and nation builders. Earlier this week, I had the privilege of speaking with our keynote speaker's former history teacher, Miss Evadne Small. And as she reflected on his school days, you could hear the pride in her voice. She said he displayed a great interest in his work. He was curious, he was highly interested in politics, and he believed strongly in proper organizational structures. She described him as very observant, respectful, and someone who was never afraid to say things as they are. But perhaps what stood out for me was when she said, even back then, he walked with purpose. And as she spoke, it became clear that long before the titles and the responsibilities, the signs of leadership were already there. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me warmly in inviting to the lectern at this time to address us our keynote speaker and portfolio minister with responsibility for the National Housing Trust, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Dr. the Most Honorable Andrew Holness.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Donetta, for your mastery of the ceremony. You're becoming a pro at this. We are grateful for the invocation. We're grateful for the optimistic words of your Member of Parliament, Mr. James Robertson. We take note of the presence of the Mayor, His Worship the Mayor, Mr. Councillor Louis Chin. We're always, always, always grateful for the contribution, the work, the effort of the NHT through its chairman, Mr. Linval Freeman, the board members who always take time from their work to be at these events, and the executive staff of the NHT led by Mr. Martin Miller. I want to make special acknowledgement of Mr. John Sinclair of it is the new Roselle Properties, the landowner and developer of these lands. Let me acknowledge and thank all the stakeholders who are here, and in particular, I have noticed a very strong representation from the Factories Corporation. I see the chairman, Mr. Tani Shirley, and other members. I see a representation as well from the HAJ, the Housing Agency of Jamaica. You know what, let me stop before I name everybody. But To all the stakeholders who are here, we're very happy to have you. And to the performers who were very energetic on stage. Please give them another round of applause. It is my pleasure to join you here in Roselle Estate, St. Thomas, for the groundbreaking of a development that speaks directly to one of the most important missions of this government, expanding access to decent, affordable, and well-planned housing. We are breaking ground for the latest initiative in transforming St. Thomas. St. Thomas is changing. For too long, this parish was spoken of as the forgotten or ignored parish. This government has been deliberate about correcting that. We have invested in roads. It took me less than 30 minutes to get here. And that roadway is not only asphalt and sidewalks. No, that roadway is a corridor for development. And I want all Jamaicans to start to think of their roadway in this way. Underneath that road would be pipes for water. And we invested heavily in putting in the proper piping infrastructure to bring water along with that roadway. Underneath that roadway would be conduits for fiber optic cables. Along parts of that roadway would be provisions for sewage. Along that roadway would be proper provisioning for drainage and other civil works to protect the road. So it is a development corridor. It is a utility corridor. And indeed, this development would not have been possible. Possible in the sense of economically viable, because what makes the project marketable and attractive is that you are less than 30 minutes away, depending on how you drive, from Kingston. From an approvals perspective, the parish council and the other approving entities would be comforted that water is here. Electricity can be provided because, I forgot to mention, along the corridor, we changed out the electrical installations in terms of the various poles and the wires that come here that can carry a heavier load. So the road has made development generally along the corridor, and this development specifically, possible. And therefore, the investment in the road is changing, transforming, increasing the possibility horizon for St. Thomas, the parish, which we have always in the past said was forgotten. The National Housing Trust remains one of the most important institutions for widening access to home ownership in Jamaica. Since its inception, the NHT has supported approximately 9,000 beneficiaries in St. Thomas. 9,000 beneficiaries. The chairman, Mr. Freeman, pointed out that he was in school when the NHD was formed. So, and he doesn't want us to guess his age. But if you know when the NHD was formed, you would know that the NHD celebrated its 50th year this year. So we can do the math. So that's 50 years ago. But the important statistic which I want you to pay attention to is that the NHD would have supported in 50 years 9,000 beneficiaries. But when we say beneficiaries, we are speaking of mortgages, or mortgagees rather, people who would be developing their homes, and so they come to the NHD for specific home development loans, for projects that we provide financing for, and some NHD housing schemes. So across all the windows of support, 9,000. For some people, 9,000 would sound like a lot. But for others who may be a little bit more understanding of the role of the NHD and the figures, 9,000 is a very small amount over 50 years. I'm making the point that after 50 years, generally, the NHD could claim responsibility. And I'm going to be, Martin, I'm going to be conservative, and you can tell me if my figure is incorrect, but you would probably be at about 160,000 housing solutions, conservatively, in terms of the housing schemes you have built and mortgages that you have supported. I'm waiting for the NHD to tell me. 270,000 when you include mortgages. But in terms of houses built, about 160. About 160. So in terms of housing built, would be about 160. Those figures can be checked. My recollection is that it's close to that. The bigger point is that we have not been building housing at pace. It has been a slow process for developing housing in Jamaica. And it is important for this to be noted, because whilst we have established the NHD, the HAJ, and other elements in the Ministry of Housing to actually do housing construction, meaning formal community housing development, Jamaica is waiting. People are waiting for formal housing solutions to come on the market so that they can purchase. But they're not just going to stay there and wait for 50 years for a house to become available to them. They're going to look at this lovely piece of land that has a beautiful vista. I'm standing here and I have the feel as if I'm in a resort. When I'm looking at the lovely blue waters of the Caribbean Sea and the cool air coming off the sea, rolling on these hills, it can only be described as salubrious. And somebody's going to see this land and say, I don't see anybody using it. Thankfully, Mr. Sinclair was vigilant about his land, so he doesn't have that challenge. But there are acreages right across Jamaica where Jamaicans desperate for housing have decided to use, because simply the housing market is not providing a solution that is viable for them. So what this government has decided to do is that we are going to outcompete the squatters. We're going to bring more housing solutions to the market at a faster pace, more affordable, and more accessible, so that people who capture land, who develop irregular settlements, who make Jamaica chaka-chaka, don't have an excuse. So that the person who is leaving school, who has done all that the society has said that they should do, they have followed all the rules, they are law-abiding, they work, they get their income, they save, and they come on the housing market now and they're ready to purchase, that there is a solution there for them. That anyone who enters the housing market for a home can find a solution affordable and in a decent period of time. That is the objective of the housing policy. So as the chairman pointed out, you will see that for the month of May, we have had, 3 groundbreaking so far, 3 events signaling the provision of housing to the market. And this is just what the NHT is doing. The NHT is tasked with bringing to market 42,000 housing solutions. And they are well on their way. This is one of the projects that will do this. So after 50 years, we claim 9,000 housing solutions, including people who have come to the NHT for mortgages, for build and own land, and people who have access housing scheme. Today, this project, which is a partnership between the National Housing Trust and New Rozelle Properties Development, will deliver 895 housing solutions. In other words, just this one project would have delivered almost 10% of what was delivered over the last 50 years. 895 housing solutions. That's a significant number of housing. Of that number, 660 will be made available to the public through the NHT, with the remaining 235 delivered by the developers, New Roselle Properties. The development is being undertaken at an estimated cost of 9.6 billion Jamaican dollars. That's a tidy sum. On 187 acres of land located approximately 3 kilometers west of the Morant Bay Urban Center. Now, I want to bring another point to the attention of this very attentive audience. This project took just over 3 years from applications to approvals, going through the parish council, through the NHT process, to all the other processes that are necessary to develop the concept and the drawings and so forth. Mr. Sinclair, is that correct? Just 3 years. And when I tell you that is short, relative to other projects, 3 years. There is a sense in the society that if it didn't take long, it wasn't well done. There's a sense that if it didn't go through a rigorous process with many redundancies and excruciating checks and cross-checks that it wasn't well done. I mean, what are the facts? The facts are that even projects that have gone through this very excruciating process, for which we believe they would have done well, even in their execution and implementation, they have failed. Even after a long drawn-out process, the very things that we intended to prevent have happened. We have seen projects that have gone through an extensive process, and when they are being implemented, environmental problems arise. Very extensive process overruns. One of the things I deal with that comes to my desk on a regular basis, even with the NHT, are projects that have gone through the most rigorous oversight, the most rigorous approvals process. And then a problem comes up. Well, when we were doing it, we did not contemplate that the rocks that were there that we had to blast would have had an impact on the cost of the project. In other words, nobody's looking at what the engineers do. Nobody looks at what the surveyors do. That have an impact on the project. We who have to deal with it, we understand it, we know. So there is a debate that is raging now about oversight. They're looking in the wrong direction. You don't know what you're talking about. This country has spent billions of dollars, countless man hours, putting in place oversight mechanisms, guardrails. For what purpose? Is it to slow down development or stop development? No, the idea was to put in place the guardrails, the oversight, so that development can happen quickly, faster, so that productivity can be improved, because the ultimate objective is to increase the prosperity of the people. The debate is raging in the society without contemplation that all of the investment that we have put in place has not guaranteed the prosperity of the people. Where Jamaica is now in its development trajectory is to utilize what we have already invested in to facilitate and advance the development of the people. 3 years to give approval for a really very small project of 187 acres of 800 houses is far too long and will not deliver the prosperity to the people. We are short 150,000 houses. And if we continue at this pace, 50 years from now, another prime minister, another minister of housing is going to make the same observation, that in 50 years you only did maybe 18,000 houses in St. Thomas. I shared something with you. We took a decision that we're going to change how we administer the fitness of motor vehicles. And we took a decision, we're going to change how you pay for your registration of your motor vehicles. And when we came up with the idea, you know, there are a lot of technical people who are saying, boy, it can't work. It's going to create more problems, more accidents going to happen. Because there is, as I tell you, the thinking. If it don't take long, If you don't have 1 million scrutiny over it, then something is wrong. That is corruption. We change it. People are very happy. They don't have to spend all this time trying to pay for their fitness and their registration. And we're going to change many more things in government to make it more efficient for you, the people of the country. Because the notion of corruption and what has not yet dawned on what I hear all the kind of people talking about is that inefficiency is actually corruption. Inefficiency is actually what is depriving the people of Jamaica of getting their house quickly. That is what we must be scrutinizing. That is what the effort must be placed on in fighting against. Inefficiency. There is always need, and I do believe that there must be a healthy skepticism about unbridled and unbounded executive authority. I'm the first to say that. But you can't get anything done by committees. You only get things done when you have effective executives. And what we have managed to do with our bureaucracy is to make executive authority and executive power ineffective. That's it. The Jamaican people will have to decide. How are we going to get things done without enabling the executives to do it and holding them to account for what is done or not done? It is the culture we hide behind, that we take away the power from the executive and therefore we don't hold the executive to account for anything. Nobody loses their job in government because they miss a timeline. That's not part of our accountability. But that needs to become a critical part of our accountability, that we get things done on time and quickly. I don't hear one person from civil society or anywhere talk about efficiency. My job is not to follow the common thought. My job is to look at things differently, to see the alternative, to chart a better course for the future we all claim we want. Because when you talk to all of them, they say, oh, we want the same prosperity, but none of them can show how that prosperity is to be delivered. We are changing St. Thomas. And we have changed St. Thomas in tangible ways. You see it when you come here. The change is happening in front of you. And we want to continue to do that. Your member of parliament pointed out that he's expecting that within the next 3 years he will have 5,000 houses. That is unambitious. I will tell you that within the next 3 years in St. Thomas, you could have double that. You could have 10,000 houses. And the NHT will tell you that there are several landowners along this stretch that have already approached the NHT for them to purchase lands and for them to partner with housing development. St. Thomas is going to benefit from an expansion in the housing thrust because of its proximity to the Kingston metropolitan area. The roadway is convenient, the lands are available, the water infrastructure has been put in, and the government's policy is to support housing development along this corridor. The caveat with that is that whatever we build here, we must build with resilience in mind. So I say to Roselle Properties, as you look to design the houses here, which I'm certain you have done your design, I encourage you to take a second look at them. That lovely view that you have is the same lovely view in New Hope in Westmoreland, Parity in St. Elizabeth, and as you go along the coast. The same lovely view. And that lovely wind that is coming off now and cooling the area can be very violent in a hurricane. So you must design for that. And that is an area of focus of the government, resilience. We don't need anybody to tell us about resilience. This government was talking about resilience before anybody started to talk about resilience. We are the ones who built resilience into our public financing and fiscal arrangements. We are the ones building resilience into our construction of our roadway. You know, there's a comment made that, well, you see how many times they dig up the roadway? Precisely, because we're not going to leave it like that. The moment we detect that there is an issue, it must be fixed. You see this roadway, the level of culverts and drainage and retaining wall, because we are building and thinking with resilience. So I implore you that as you build this lovely housing scheme, it must be able to withstand a Category 5. And let's be frank, even in areas that were directly hit by Hurricane Melissa, there were houses that stood up and nothing happened to them. And when you look at their construction, you can see exactly what protected them. Even hip roofs and timber roofs stood up because of how they were constructed. So I urge you to think about resilience. So yes, you might get a threshold minimum for your design, but improve on it to make sure that even if you are hit by a Category 5, the next day the person who owns the home will just come up and sweep away the leaves, maybe the fallen trees, and they're fine. So build with resilience in mind. As I close, ladies and gentlemen, this project is being financed under what is called the Guaranteed Purchase Program through the NHT. And what this does is that the NHT, through an agreement, will purchase the homes at a particular price. And what this does is to give the developer a certain kind of insurance that he doesn't build a house and is there struggling for people to buy it. Even though I don't think you'll have that problem. But the Guaranteed Purchase Program also places some funds at the disposal of the developer up front, so you can begin your work. Not all of the houses, as I mentioned before, will be purchased by the NHT. So the developer still has a certain number of houses that will be at their discretion to sell or how they sell them. But 660 will be at the discretion of the NHT. So NHT contributors will be able to access those homes. The Guaranteed Purchase Program, I think, is a wonderful innovation, and I encourage more developers, especially in St. Thomas, to approach the NHT to utilize it. The National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority has a particular pathway built in it, which we call the FAST program. And this is to encourage projects that help to form resilience, that are in synergy with infrastructure, especially in areas where the government is doing reconstruction activity, to apply to NARA, to have these projects considered for quick approval so that you don't have to spend 3 and 5 years in gestation before the project can come to fruition. The minimum threshold in terms of the financial threshold is 15 million US dollars. This project would have easily qualified because you are at almost $9 billion. So we urge investors, we urge developers who will be in proximity to projects that NARA is developing, or projects that could be of strategic importance, projects that support the government's stated agenda for development, to apply to NARA to be considered for the development. So I'm very happy, as I said, to be here today. And as we break ground, let us understand what is being planted here. We are planting homes. We are planting communities. But we are creating opportunities that will bear fruit for families and their future in Jamaica. Most important, we are giving Jamaicans housing with dignity. Housing with dignity. Because if you think of what is at the core of the heart of the Jamaican struggle, every Jamaican wants a piece of the rock. Just a little piece. It doesn't have to be big. But more Jamaicans are beginning to understand that if you go and grab a little piece of the rock, you lock yourself in and you lock out everyone else. Because if it is done in an uncoordinated, unplanned way, you are literally cutting off your future. So if you grab it, it's hard to put in the road after. It's hard to put in the water after. Garbage can be collected there. Criminals will take it as a haven. You will never feel free because you're always hiding away, hoping that somebody don't come to say it's their land. And we're trying to break that. Not trying to deprive you of the land. I believe you should have it. But it has to be in a transparent way, in an orderly way, and in a way that does not limit our development horizon in the future. What if this land were squatted out? How would we get the value out of this for everyone? So, I'm not blaming the squatters. I'm not blaming the people who will do irregular development. Government should have accelerated quickly to provide the houses to the formal housing market. And these solutions, by the way, are not only concrete houses like these. Because these houses are going to go at a particular price point. I gather that they might be going somewhere in the region of about $17 million for the 2-bedroom, thereabout. Who knows, maybe after the house is finished, keep the price as it is now, please. So we try to bring the houses at affordable. But let's face it, there are people who will not be able to afford 17 million. They want a $10 million solution. They might even want a $7 million solution. They might even want a $5 million solution. And the challenge is that we are not providing the solutions. We are now exploring many different options, which we will now have to scale to ensure that we can give every Jamaican the opportunity to have a shelter solution. It might not be a grand palace, but it might be something that is comfortable, that they can have their children and the rest of their extended family with proper facilities. And right now, the hurricane has given us the opportunity to explore housing innovations. The NHT has secured in the region of 2,500 what we call semi-permanent modular housing solutions. And these will be deployed right across Jamaica as we take on relocation and reconstruction work. We're going to test those houses over a period of time. We're going to see how they stand up to our weather, our environment. But more than that, we're going to see how our people use them. Because, you know, our people have a particular way of how we use things. Some people might want to go and add on to them. So we're going to see how they stand up, how they can, how modular they are, how they can be expanded. You know, when they were building the houses in Portmore, one of the factors that we didn't contemplate was how hot they would have been. And so we have to test them to see whether or not these new housing solutions, the heat that they generate, we have to test them for whether or not they can stand up to the wind and rain that is common in our areas. So once we have tested those housing solutions, then we intend to make those available right across the market to replace the conventional way in which we build in Jamaica, which is sometimes you want to put up a little thing, and what you end up doing is putting 5 sheet of ply and some old sheet of zinc, and it just takes away from the aesthetics of the place. It devalues your community. It makes you feel like this is all that I will ever have. But if we could find that building technology is improving rapidly, materials technology is improving rapidly, and we need to be able to integrate those into our everyday building options and choices. And so the NHT will use this as an opportunity to see how we can integrate the newer, cost-effective, pre-built modular solutions into our traditional building methodologies. So we are intent on increasing the pace of housing delivery far ahead of the demand that exists. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much for listening.